Whenever Blizzard releases a new hero, there's a lot of discourse, both positive and negative, towards said release, which means that in some shape or form that hero is leaving a mark in the game. In the case of Hazard, most of the discussion was surrounding his rather distinct visual design, and although many didn't like it, it at least made him the center of attention for a few days after his reveal. Unfortunately, in terms of gameplay, he just didn't leave much of an impression, and we can see the results of it as he's currently the least played hero in the entire game despite sporting a solid win rate. So today I'm going to talk about why this is the case and whether Blizzard should be able to fix some of his issues or if he's a lost cause. Before starting, this is not a jab towards Hazard players or anything of the sort. I personally like playing him, but I can admit his flaws that are pushing players away from him. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion, and you can write down in the comments what you think about Hazard and his current state. As always, if you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like and subscribe, as it helps me a ton to make more content in the future. Thank you. To begin with, we need to look at who Hazard is, what he's able to do, and how he's meant to be played. Hazard is a hybrid between a dive and a roll tank, most similar to a hero like D.Va, who has both good movement options as well as sustained durability and damage, with his overall short effective range and lack of direct ally protection as the glaring major weaknesses. As a diver, he has access to very solid horizontal mobility for a tank, with Violent Leap, allowing him to move around the map reliably on another short cooldown, as well as being able to both wall climb and use his juggled wall to access high ground or other vertical spots on maps like Gibraltar or Dorado. At the same time, Violent Leap is also his best burst damage option, so you need to think whether to use it as mobility or to save it to finish someone off, which is reasonable decision making that similar heroes have like Doomfist Slam, though there is a major difference I will talk about later. At the same time, as a brawler, he needs both a form of sustained damage, as well as some form of sustain or high upturn damage mitigation. On one hand, his block is on paper one of the best defensive tools in the game, and while it has been nerfed twice already, making it less potent against constant damage, it's still a very reliable damage reduction with a big resource bar that allows him to deny burst damage, as well as being able to deal with some of the most frustrating anti-tank tools like Ana's nade, as it lasts long enough for a nade to expire and allow your team to heal you afterwards. In the damage department, his shotgun has a very short recovery time, which allows him to have decent DPS up close. Very up close, especially when he can use his block to reload, maintaining his uptime for longer. All of this is very reminiscent of D.Va, one of the most popular tanks in the history of the game, as well as being a clear inspiration as the starting point for his kit, but obviously things will diverge a bit and the cracks will start to show when it comes to his gameplay loop. To continue with Hazard's hit, his wall and ultimate are also powerful crowd control and initiation tools that can both isolate and knock down enemies, similar to how Mei has been played for almost a decade. This should allow the Hazard player and his team to take down the isolated enemy with ease, which is what differentiates himself from D.Va, who has a more dive adjacent target access and initiation tools. When you look at his kit this way, it sounds quite powerful, doesn't it? He's a tank with good mobility, defense, CC, AoE damage, burst damage. How isn't he the most popular or broken tank in the game? The problem is that because Blizzard gave him all these tools and rather few weaknesses, in order to make him a fair tank that isn't permaban like some other heroes, his abilities are all either unreliable, lack the impact you might expect, or force you to sacrifice part of a kit for less than optimal use cases that you might want to use differently. Let's take a deeper look at his primary fire. Yeah, while it may seem like a powerful shotgun with a fast fire rate, the pattern and high damage falloff makes it one of the least reliable among its peers, both in damage output and ability to confirm kills, so you will generally use it just to spam at the tank to chip them off, as they have wider hitboxes that better align with the shotgun spread. This is all made worse by the fact that, unlike most shotguns, they are traveling projectiles, which makes it even harder to land consistently when you're not at point blank, compared to the insane burst damage of Hawk's primary, as well as his secondary fire being a better mid-range option, or the more reliable mid-range usage that D.Vas or Junkerins sport. Hazard is only ever useful when directly on top of the enemy, which will lead to a Hazard player to be forced to a bad position in top of enemies to pressure them, especially when you consider his block reload now only works if it deals damage. Every other tank I mentioned, while still most effective at point blank, can still provide value on mid-ranges. Roadhog has his hook, and Junkerins has her knife toss for example, which is something that if you go against either of them have to respect, allowing the Hog or Queen player to control space without hard committing. That being said, those are dedicated brawl tanks, and like them, he has the mobility to get on top of people, and his wall allows him to lock down enemies with ease, as well as scoring as another way to mitigate damage. So, what's the issue? Well, his dash does allow him to jump onto people, and is overall the best tool he has at his disposal, and with the other burst damage option, this is the primary way he finds success in the battlefield. Of course, it isn't comparable to, say, Empowered Punch or Diva's Booster plus Missile combo, but it's reliable and impactful enough to serve its purpose. The biggest issue with this approach is that whenever you aren't able to execute your combo perfectly, the enemy will easily survive you, either escape or heal your damage. So the only thing you achieved is getting into a poor position, where you will be able to get hit from multiple angles, making his block a lot less effective as the angle it covers is just 180 in front of him. And while you might be able to hold enough for your leap to come back, the feedback for the player is essentially that getting that deep into the enemy is worthless, and outside that range you can only possibly look to trap people with his wall or ultimate. The former unfortunately feels a lot weaker than it is on paper. While it can cover some spaces, it is very narrow and can't block most choke points, and despite having a built-in anti-mobility tool, it doesn't function against mobile targets that well, as the knockback isn't strong enough and actually has like a small cooldown. So people can get hit by the wall and then dash away from it. Obviously you're still contributing by claiming space and forcing the enemy away, but the average player would rather just be able to kill the enemy. The wall itself is also rather easy to destroy, but it will make a very obnoxious tool if it weren't, as Hazard already has enough defensive tools at his disposal that can make him complicated to kill. That being said, because he has so many options, he usually has to use all of them to survive sustained combat, which can sum up most of his problems. All of his abilities can do a lot of things potentially, so each output has to be weaker to compensate. Let's look at his block. Well, it's a good defensive tool like I mentioned. The block angle is pretty narrow. You can get headshot while using it, as well as being the lowest damage reaction among its class, with it being 60% while Dooms and Ram are 75%. And why is that? Because it's also a damage tool, not only due to spike damage, but also because it slowly reloads its primary. This makes each ability far less impactful than they are. Another comparison to be made is his wall to mace. Which ability do you think is stronger? Most people would opt for mace wall, as its output is dedicated toward controlling spaces rather than a multi-option tool, and while it can be used defensively or to get to some high rounds, there are more fringe use cases, so the wall doesn't need to sacrifice size or durability to make it fair. A similar comparison can be made with his ultimate and Reinhardt's Third Shatter. While Hazard has much higher range and is able to go over most covers, as well as dealing a huge chunk of damage that is able to finish people off who escape at low HP, it has a much higher cast time, so the enemy is able to react in time, and even if you do land it, it only roots you in place for a rather short duration, meaning you can still fight back in some capacity. Rein's, on the other hand, while much harder to get in range of the enemy, once it lands it's basically a guaranteed kill, so it naturally will feel more impactful for the average player, making Hazard's insane versatility a double-edged sword. His leap is also the weakest of its kind, having less range and verticality than Winston's Jump or Doomfist Slam, and a longer cooldown than Demon's Boosters. Yes, he can use his climb as his wall for extra verticality, but actually wasting his wall for it is suboptimal, and something you should never actually do. His wall climb also used to be very clunky, but thankfully is one of the things that got addressed rather quickly. This problem, combined with the other counterplay to most of his abilities, make his kit very low in impact and with a lack of flashiness you might find with other tanks. As much as people can hate on Doomfist, there is no denial that landing a fully charged and power punch to squishy targets feels amazing, which is why Blizzard is very reluctant of nerfing it. On the other hand, Hazard is very inoffensive and doesn't have anything that actually makes him stand out or that makes him unique, which is funny when you look at his visual design and find a neon cyberpunk character in a game full of mostly normal looking people. A boring kit can work quite well if it's a companion that I designed that complements that idea, as well as having a broad appeal in terms of accessibility. Just look at Soldier 76. He's a very simple looking old man with a very simple kit that is very intuitive and easy to use. While he doesn't have the flashiness of, say, Genji, still finds a player base that just want to shoot at people. Hazard is not exactly easy or intuitive to play at first glance, which already will push away a lot of potential Hazard players, but he also lacks a kit that would make those few who like him want to one-trick him, unlike heroes like Wrecking Ball that really reward mastery despite how hard he is to pick up. So, is there anything Blizzard can do to fix him? I believe some of the problems he has are by design, but there are some nudges and adjustments that could be done to at least make him more rewarding to play and master for that small portion of players that are interested in him, as well as solidifying his identity. As a general premise, I will push the power of his abilities towards a more consistent output with higher chances of outplay and skill expression, allowing him to provide more value without hard committing all the time, or reducing his sustain and making him easier to kill if he messes up. So a shift towards a higher risk-reward playstyle, but one that doesn't force you to stay on top of people 24/7 to apply any form of meaningful damage. That's a bit closer to how the other tanks function in Overwatch, as well as rewarding more mastery on the hero and precise cooldown usage. As a reminder, numbers could easily be off, but what matters is the overall goals and direction that I believe he should be pushed towards. For his primary fire, there are many possible ways to help it out, but I believe making it have a narrower spread, slightly less fall of damage, while having a slightly lower fire rate would smooth out his effective range, allowing him to play more effectively at a similar range to D.Va, only needing to get at point blank when the situation allows it, while reducing some of the tank bullying and his DPS against bigger targets. For his block, I would completely rework it into something more thematic and a tool that allows him to outplay enemies if timed correctly, while remove the holding block playstyle that I don't find particularly interesting. So when Hazard presses his secondary fire, he will play the same animation as now, but it will now grant him 60% damage reaction for 1.5 seconds, and whenever an ability hits him in front, he will send a spike towards them that deals 70 damage no matter the distance, though it will get destroyed by terrain or shields like Juno's torpedoes. An enemy can only trigger this effect once per ability usage. Most importantly, Hazard will be CC immune for the first half of the ability. This allows him to have a tool to deal with CC, as well as rewarding good timing while removing the less skillful outputs of holding block in front of an enemy or just mitigating tons of damage without much thought. Due to the current long duration and fast filling bar, and without the ability slowing yourself down, he can actually be balanced around his mobility, allowing a more skill expressive kit overall. The damage reaction would work regardless of the angle, so he has an actual way to mitigate damage when he does choose to jump to finish people off. Violent Leap would get a cooldown reaction of 1 second, so he can use it similarly to D.Va, but without as much verticality, moving constantly to different positions to pressure people and back off as needed. This is also in compensation of losing the high uptime of his old damage mitigation. Jagged Wall simply needs to be wider to actually be able to trap people, as well as a stronger effect so it functions better against mobile enemies, making his identity a lot stronger as a unique tank with disrupting tools against movement-based heroes like he was originally intended to be. I know hinder effects can be annoying to deal with, but it doesn't slow like Cassidy's nade, and I would give it a very small duration, so it's mostly to interrupt dashes used to ignore the wall. To compensate, the damage and HP of the ability would need to come down, so the counterplay shifts around breaking it rather than ignoring it, and reducing its power as a defensive and burst damage tool, since there is more power on his other abilities to deal damage and survive. While I did mention some problem with his ult, with a stronger wall he should be able to use it more reliably after hitting someone with it, while still having enough counterplay and on its cast time and telegraph visuals, and the fact it only locks you in place compared to Rein's Shatter for example. It's a very unique ultimate and it only needs the rest of his kit to be adjusted for it to be more reliable. All of these changes should hopefully make Hazard a lot better if you choose to dedicate to play him, as well as granting him a lot more unique outputs like being able to hinder enemies or parry CC abilities like Gonna Sleep, while making him a lot more punishing if you mess up, and discouraging the less fun playstyle of just playing defensively and holding block anytime you are getting any form of damage. That's all everyone, so what do you think about Hazard? Do you play him or would you wish his kit worked differently? Thanks for watching and I hope to see you next time.